Preparing for a cybersecurity at Bank of America interview? You've reached Candy Mentor, and this video is for you. We'll walk through 15 key questions you're likely to face. For each question, you'll see a sample answer, followed by the key points to cover. Subscribe, like, and share, and drop a topic request in the comments. Question 1. How would you approach securing online banking APIs that process high-value customer transactions? For online banking APIs, I start with strong identity, OAuth 2.0 or mutual TLS for service calls, MFA for risky user actions, and least privilege authorization. Every request should be validated, encrypted, logged, and rate limited. I would add transaction-level monitoring for anomalies like unusual device, location, or velocity. The key is layered defense. Prevent abuse at the edge, enforce business rules in a service, and detect fraud quickly. While answering, focus on authentication, authorization, rate limiting, input validation, encryption, audit logging, fraud signals, and how controls protect high-value financial transactions without breaking customer experience. Question 2. Explain the CIA triad in the context of a financial institution like Bank of America. The CIA triad is the baseline model for security. Confidentiality protects customer data such as account numbers and PII. Integrity ensures balances, payments, and audit records cannot be altered without authorization. Availability keeps ATMs, trading, mobile banking, and payment rails running during attacks or failures. In a bank, I would not treat these equally in every system. A ledger needs extreme integrity, while customer channels also need strong availability and resilience. Make sure to cover confidentiality, integrity, availability, examples from banking systems, and why integrity of balances and transactions is often as critical as preventing data disclosure. Question 3. If employees report a phishing email campaign, how would you investigate and respond? If employees report a phishing campaign, I first preserve samples and analyze headers, sender infrastructure, links, and attachments in a sandbox. Then I block indicators at email gateway, DNS, proxy, and EDR layers. If credentials were entered, I force password resets, revoke sessions, and review risky logins. After containment, I communicate clearly with affected users and tune detections. For Bank of America, speed matters because phishing can become account takeover or wire fraud. In your answer, talk about containment, user reporting, email header analysis, malicious link detonation, credential resets, awareness training, and metrics such as click rate and reporting rate. Question 4. How do you triage a SIEM alert for suspicious login activity on a privileged account? I triage a SIEM alert by asking 3 questions. What happened? How important is the asset? And what evidence supports it? I correlate authentication logs, endpoint telemetry, network flow, and threat intelligence. A failed login spike on a test server is different from impossible travel on a privileged treasury account. I document timestamps, users, indicators, and actions taken. Good triage reduces noise while ensuring high-risk events escalate quickly with clean evidence. Be sure to mention alert context, asset criticality, log correlation, false positives, escalation criteria, evidence collection, and how a SOC analyst prioritizes threats in a regulated banking environment. Question 5. Describe how you would run a vulnerability management program for banking applications and infrastructure. A strong vulnerability program starts with knowing the assets. I would scan continuously, classify findings by CVSS, exploitability, internet exposure, data sensitivity, and business criticality, then assign remediation SLAs. In banking, patching cannot blindly disrupt payment or trading systems, so testing and change windows matter. For accepted risks, I require documented compensating controls and expiry dates. The program should show trends, aging criticals, patch compliance, repeat offenders, and risk reduction. While answering, cover asset inventory, vulnerability scanning, CVSS plus business context, remediation SLAs, exception handling, patch testing, and reporting risk to technology and compliance stakeholders. Question 6. What does least privilege mean, and how would you enforce it across enterprise banking systems? Least privilege means users and services get only the access required for their role for the shortest practical time. I implement it through RBAC, privileged access management, strong MFA, and periodic recertification. Segregation of duties is critical in banking. The same person should not create and approve a high-value payment. I also watch movers, because role changes often leave toxic access combinations. Automation helps, but approvals and audit trails must be clear. Make sure to cover role-based access, privileged access management, segregation of duties, joiner, mover, leaver processes, access reviews, MFA, and why identity is central to financial security. Question 7. How would you protect sensitive customer data, both at rest and in transit? Encryption is only as strong as key management. For data in transit, I expect modern TLS with strong ciphers and certificate hygiene. For data at rest, databases, backups, object stores, and laptops should be encrypted based on classification. In a bank, HSMs and centralized key management are common for sensitive keys, with rotation and separation of duties. For card or account data, tokenization can reduce exposure and compliance scope. In your answer, talk about TLS, encryption at rest, key management, HSMs, rotation, tokenization, data classification, and protecting customer PII and payment information across systems. Question 8. Walk me through your incident response approach for a ransomware attack affecting internal systems. In a ransomware incident, the first priority is containment without destroying evidence. I isolate affected hosts, disable suspected accounts, preserve logs and memory where possible, and confirm the blast radius. Then I work with business continuity teams to restore critical services from clean, tested backups. Legal, risk, and communications teams need early involvement because banks face regulatory obligations. After recovery, I focus on root cause, initial access, privilege escalation, lateral movement, and control gaps. Be sure to mention preparation, isolation, evidence preservation, backups, business continuity, legal and regulatory notification, communication discipline, root cause analysis, and lessons learned after recovery testing. Question 9. What is SQL injection, and how would you prevent it in a customer-facing banking application? SQL injection happens when untrusted input becomes executable database logic. For example, a login field that concatenates user input into a query can be manipulated to bypass checks or extract data. My primary defense is parameterized queries or prepared statements, not manual escaping. I also validate inputs, restrict database permissions, suppress verbose errors, and test with SAST, DAST, and code review. A WAF helps, but it should never be the main control. While answering, focus on how SQL injection works: parameterized queries, input validation, least privileged database accounts, error handling, WAF limitations, and secure coding review practices testing. Question 10. What security controls would you prioritize when moving regulated workloads to the cloud? Cloud security starts with the shared responsibility model. The provider secures the cloud, while we secure identities, data, workloads, and configurations. I would enforce strong IAM, private networking where appropriate, encryption, centralized logging, and policy as code guardrails. Misconfigured storage and overprivileged roles are common risks. For regulated banking workloads, I also need evidence: asset ownership, change history, control mappings, vulnerability status, and incident logs. The goal is scalable security without slowing delivery. Make sure to cover shared responsibility, IAM, network segmentation, logging, encryption, configuration baselines, container security, secret management, and compliance evidence for cloud workloads in banking. Question 11. Explain Zero Trust architecture and how it applies to a large financial enterprise. Zero Trust assumes the network is already hostile. Instead of trusting a user because they are on the corporate VPN, I verify identity, device health, location, behavior, and authorization for each access request. In practice, that means MFA, conditional access, microsegmentation, strong service identity, and continuous monitoring. For a bank with branches, vendors, cloud, and remote employees, Zero Trust reduces lateral movement. The trade-off is operational complexity, so rollout should be risk-based. In your answer, Talk about never trust, always verify, device posture, user risk, microsegmentation, continuous monitoring, least privilege, and replacing perimeter-only security models for enterprises. Question 12. How do regulatory and compliance requirements influence cybersecurity controls in banking? Compliance proves certain controls exist. Security proves they reduce real risk. In a financial institution, frameworks like PCI DSS, GLBA, SOX, and FFIEC guidance shape requirements around access, logging, encryption, vendor risk, and incident response. I treat compliance as a baseline, not the finish line. Good teams maintain evidence continuously through automated control checks, tickets, logs, and approvals. When auditors ask, we should show both control design and operating effectiveness. Be sure to mention that compliance is not security, but discuss PCI DSS, GLBA, SOX, FFIEC expectations, audit evidence, control testing, and risk management practices. Question 13. How would you perform threat modeling for a new wire transfer or payments feature? For a new wire transfer feature, I would threat model before implementation. First, map data flows, customer device, authentication service, payment service, approval workflow, ledger, notifications, and third parties. Then identify trust boundaries and apply STRIDE. Spoofing customers, tampering with amounts, repudiating approvals, leaking PII, denial of service, or privilege escalation. I would add abuse cases like mule accounts and session hijacking. The output should be concrete requirements, not a diagram nobody uses. While answering, focus on assets, trust boundaries, data flows, STRIDE, abuse cases, fraud scenarios, security requirements, and integrating threat modeling into design reviews early enough. Question 14. What is the difference between traditional antivirus and EDR, and why does it matter? Traditional antivirus mainly blocks known malware using signatures. EDR goes further by collecting endpoint telemetry and detecting suspicious behavior, such as credential dumping, PowerShell abuse, process injection, or ransomware encryption patterns. It also supports response actions like isolating a host, killing a process, or collecting forensic artifacts. In a bank, endpoint visibility is critical because one compromised workstation can lead to privileged access or fraud operations. EDR is powerful, but tuning is needed to avoid alert fatigue. Make sure to cover signature-based detection, behavioral analytics, endpoint telemetry, response actions, ransomware detection, investigation value, and why endpoint visibility matters in enterprise banking environments. Question 15. How would you evaluate the cybersecurity risk of a third-party vendor used by the bank? Vendor risk is a major banking concern because third parties may handle customer data, host critical services, or connect into internal networks. I would assess what data they access, their security controls, SOC2 or ISO reports, pen test summaries, breach history, and financial stability. Contracts should include encryption, access control, audit rights, breach notification, and data deletion requirements. The work does not end at onboarding. High-risk vendors need continuous monitoring and periodic reassessment. In your answer, talk about due diligence, data access, SOC2 reports, penetration testing evidence, contractual controls, ongoing monitoring, concentration risk, and incident notification clauses. If you are still with us, congratulations. You are much ahead of the rest and serious about preparing for your interview. We hope we were able to add value to your preparation and create some helpful content. Do not forget to like and share this video. Your small act can do great things for us.